Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. It is a cloudy, rainy Thursday here in greater Cincinnati. And we welcome you, as always, to Dialed In. I'm Tom Brenneman, joined by Luke Brenneman, sitting on the campus of the undefeated Indiana University Hoosiers. Off this week, Luke Brenneman, so you get a little time off this weekend.
Yes, sir. I mean, a bye week doesn't hurt, but if you give the best coach in the country a bye week before they play the top five Ohio
Oh,
State
my
Buckeyes, then I'd be a little
God.
bit scared if you were in Columbus right now. But let's kick off the show and get things going.
Scared in Columbus?
I don't know. I
Is
don't
that what you
know.
just said?
I heard this old adage that 9.5 to 10 point underdogs typically lose outright at home. So that would happen to be the
Okay.
number. I would hate for that to happen.
Okay. Casey McAllister is our outstanding producer and show contributor. Casey, are you doing all right today? It sounded like I caught the last few minutes of Off the Bench. It sounded like you were catching some heat about something today. Is everything all right?
Yeah, everything's fine, Tom. We're just me and Jacob. We were just passionately debating why people hate Zach Taylor, and I think we ended up ultimately coming full circle and both agreeing with each other that the play calling is not the issue. It's the whole team scheme and how the team is their identity, and all that falls on the head coach. And we came full circle. But yeah, we're doing
Okay.
good. Today's off the bench
Okay.
is great.
Good. I don't think for a second that most people hate. That's a big word. Zach Taylor. I don't think they do at all. He seems like a very likable guy. And his press conferences are nothing to write home about, but he's not alone in that regard. The play calling thing is a legitimate concern. And one of these shows, I'll get into some of the conversations I've had with college coaches this year. The most notable being Lane Kiffin and Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien was a head coach in the NFL for many, many years with the Houston Texans, took them to the playoffs 5 times. They had 6 winning seasons out of his 7. The only year they didn't was their expansion year. And I met with him last weekend, and we talked about this. Same thing with Lane Kiffin. Now, you can say, well, that's a college game. Well, it had nothing to do with it. They were just both talking about how much work there is as a play caller to get ready for a game during the week. And that if you're the head coach and you're having to oversee everything else, that being the play caller becomes a tremendous challenge. But we'll save that for another day. Our show is presented by UDF and Encore Technologies. We thank them for their outstanding support. We come your way, as many of you know already, but if you don't, we're live on Mondays at 9 on Chatterbox Sports. We post later in case you want to download it on the Believe Network, and then we're here Thursdays at noon. You can find us by the thousands, soon to be the tens of thousands, already dialed in on YouTube, our Chatterbox Sports page. You can download us anywhere, anytime. Just search Dialed In with Tom Brenneman, and you're dialed in. The Bengals, Sunday Night Football. Now, a lot of people, when that game was moved, you thought maybe the Bengals would be coming off a win over Baltimore, which we know didn't happen last Thursday night. Week ago tonight. And you were thinking, why would they do that? Well, they knew what they were doing. Because if the Bengals win this game, their chances of making the playoffs are 53%. If they lose this game, their chances of making the playoffs drop to 22%. How you feeling about this one? We're going to talk about this here in a little while. There are a lot of good games around the NFL this week. Starting tonight, you got Philadelphia and Washington. Philadelphia is playing good football. That's a pretty good team. And Washington, they dropped one of the Steelers last week, but they certainly have been maybe the single biggest surprise in the NFL. Sunday, you talk about 2 monster games. All 4 teams will be in the playoffs right now. Baltimore plays at Pittsburgh. We'll talk about that one. And then Kansas City, undefeated, plays at Buffalo. College football, we're going to talk a lot about this today because we're getting down to some teams have one game left, some teams have 2 games left, some teams have 3 games left. It's really weird, the whole scheduling thing. UC is at Iowa State. Ohio State plays at Wrigley Field. Now, I got to tell you, I have broadcast hundreds of games at Wrigley Field. I think it would be so cool to go to a football game there and to see Ohio State play there. So they're playing there at Wrigley Field against Northwestern this weekend. The big one is in the SEC. Tennessee goes to Georgia. Georgia was picked number 1 in the preseason, and most of this year has been ranked number 1 till they lost at Alabama. 2 weeks ago, they were all the way up to number 2, despite a loss, in the college football playoff rankings. And then they lost a second time. If Georgia loses this time, they're done. They're done because they're not going to play in the SEC championship game. If they lose this game, the number 1 ranked team in the country will not play in the college football playoff because they can't get to the title game. And as a 3-loss team, they're not getting in. Or would they? We'll talk more about in a minute. And the other game I think that's worth keeping an eye on is Utah at Colorado. Now, Utah has not had the year. Their quarterback, Cam Rising, again has been hurt the entire year. God bless him. That kid kept coming back, and he just couldn't stay healthy. But Utah plays at Colorado, and Colorado is very much in the hunt for the college football playoff. They're destined right now to play in the Big 12 championship game against BYU. And a lot of people think that Colorado would beat BYU. So this is a big one for Coach Prime. All right, fellas, let's start with the NFL. Luke, your thoughts about this game for the Bengalis. What's got to happen for them to win on Sunday?
Well, to start, what's got to happen is this idea of, we've heard it a couple of times already this season, win or go home, do or die. Are the Bengals backs against the wall? I think this is it. And it doesn't get much bigger than this. On the road, Sunday Night Football, a first-year head coach, a really good quarterback in the AFC that at one point was getting comparisons to Joe Burrow, who was better, who's having a better start to the career. I think that all panned out accordingly. But now is really the biggest one. This is the biggest Burrow versus Herbert matchup. The Chargers are winners of their last 3. And this is everything for the Bengals because you said the percentages. The way the AFC has worked out, they are giving the Bengals life to make the postseason. And I think this is one of those games where, unlike the Ravens, where the Ravens last week, they're Super Bowl contenders, guys. This is a team that's playing really good football. Yes, they've had some struggles, but you can't really go into that game playing the caliber of football that the Bengals have played through 10 weeks and say, if you don't win this game, then you don't even deserve to be in the postseason, because I disagree with that statement. Now, this one, on the other hand, yes, absolutely. They're a couple games over 500. They're on a winning streak. But this is not a world-beating football team. It wasn't supposed to be. So you got to give your flowers to Jim Harbaugh and that staff. They have the best defense in the NFL when it comes to points per game. I think it's 13.1 points per game to be exact. So I don't know how you guys feel about that, the way the Bengals offense is their strong suit, and the other side of the ball can be a nightmare at times. But this is one of those games where I'm going to toss it up, see how it plays out. It's a 1-point spread. Flip a coin. If you deserve them to be in the postseason when this is all said and done, then you go out and win this game. I am a little bit nervous. I don't love going to LA, but I do like Sunday Night Football. So back-to-back primetime games. Let's see how we play out this time in LA.
Well, you're right. You're spot on in that we have said seemingly a handful of times already this year, whether it was the 0-3 start, whether it was a couple of weeks later against this team or that team, then the Ravens last week about, this is the season. And look, those stats numbers I just gave you, their likelihood of making the playoffs would back that up. But, if the Colts lose, they're playing the Jets. If the Broncos lose, we could be sitting here saying the same thing next week. Bengals are off next week. And then they have their final 6 games of the year, 2 against the Steelers, as we know. And they also play Cleveland, they play Dallas, they play Tennessee, and they play the Broncos. So we might be sitting here saying the same thing again in 2 weeks from now. I don't know. But this one just has the feeling, Casey. There have been others that, sort of took the wind out of your sails when you got beat like last Thursday night. But this, I think, would feel like one where if you don't win it, um, I don't know if you think you can get there. Is that fair to say? You feel the same way?
Yeah, I do feel the same way. At some point, they got to win a meaningful game, right? They got to close
Right.
out a game and show that they're capable of beating a team that's comparable, that's or that's competent. You know, that's going to be competing for a playoff spot. I think that, to Luke's point, this has been this is not a great matchup for the Bengals. Defense leads the Chargers. Defense leads the league in points allowed. They're in top 10 in both passing and rushing
Yep.
defense. They're able to get after the quarterback with Khalil Mack. They got Joey Bosa still. He's not been heavily involved, but they've got some guys there that can really get after you. That team is very, very good, solid. Right now, they're one of the least penalized teams in the league. Very disciplined. I think that the Chargers pose a difficult challenge for the Bengals, but I was looking at the Chargers and I was looking at injuries. They're very banged up right now. They won't be with their top three corners. Asante Samuel's on injured reserve. Deion Leonard, injured reserve. Christian Fulton's questionable right now. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, questionable. They didn't really practice on Wednesday. So they're kind of banged up right now. And if you look at who they've played this season,
Yep. Yep.
none of those teams really have a great offense except for maybe the Cardinals. And they did handle business against the Cardinals. But none of those teams really jump off the page to me that say like they've really been tested themselves. So this will be a good challenge for both teams. I think that they both have a lot to prove. Chargers specifically, they want to get this win so they can kind of stake a claim and hold on to that wild card spot for sure. And on the other side, the Bengals are trying to really make at least a push for a playoff spot. Like you said, 50% if they win, 20 if they don't. It's a big game. It's a huge matchup for both sides.
And another reason it's a big game for the Chargers, and I know we're not here to talk about the Chargers, but you brought it up, Casey, and Luke, you mentioned they've won 3 in a row, but look who they've beaten in their last 3 games. They've beaten the Saints, terrible. They've beaten the Browns, terrible. They've beaten the Titans, terrible. Now they've gone out and won the games, so you got to give them credit for that. You mentioned the Cardinal game. They held Arizona to 17 points, but they were only able to score 15 points. Their other wins this year have come against Denver, Carolina, and the Raiders. And so, you're right. This is not a world beater team. It's not a juggernaut offensive team. It is a physical team. It is a very physical team. And when you have a defense with numbers like Casey just ripped off, when you have a running game like they do, I don't know about you guys, but anyway, to finish the original thought, this is a huge game for them. Yes, because they're trying to stay in a playoff hunt. But their schedule the rest of the way takes a dramatic turn. They've got the Bengals. The following 2 weeks later, or 1 week later, they play the Ravens. The Falcons aren't any good, but they can shock you every now and again. They've got to play Kansas City again. They've got to play Tampa Bay. They've got to play Denver again. And so, any win that they feel like they can pick off, when you start looking at some of the other games, which you think, maybe they're not going to win that one. I think that this is just an important game for them as it is for the Bengals. It may not hold, Luke, the desperation feel when you're 6-3 as opposed to 4-6. But this is a game the Chargers are going into. They may not have thought it when the year started, but this is a game going into, I have to believe, they think they should win.
Yeah, it's almost the same thing in the Bengals, to Casey's point, where the Bengals need to prove to themselves that they can beat a team that's worth something. The Chargers are 6-3 and need to prove the same thing. And the Bengals have struggled, and the wins that they have are against bad teams. But that's the same with the Chargers, and they've had the luxury of closing out games down the stretch. I mean, I think their win against the Broncos is really good. But I love that point you bring up, because I would make the argument that this is undoubtedly the Chargers' biggest game of the season. I think there's something special when it comes to hosting Sunday Night Football at home,
Yep.
especially at a venue like the one they have. So to get some national recognition for a team that, with Jim Harbaugh now under the saddle, they might not play the most pretty style of football that's going to get you on SportsCenter on Sunday afternoon. But hey, no one's really talking about LA right now. And next thing you know, the spotlight is off Justin Herbert. It's on to the defense. It's a physical, ugly, gritty type of winning football team. And they're going to say, hey, put the lights on us. Bring in Joe Burrow. We're favored. We're at home. And this is their game of the year. So I love this matchup on Sunday Night Football. Typically, it's weird to have a Sunday night game get flexed in when there's a team playing under 500. And I think that this absolutely has the makings for a primetime game because it's both teams' games of the year. And I think those are two great points that both of you guys brought up.
I don't know if any of you guys have seen or anybody in the chat has seen the locker room celebration from the Chargers' last game. For people out there that say head coaches don't make a difference, they have absolutely zero idea what they're talking about. Watching Jim Harbaugh, and then I saw Quentin Johnston, who had a terrible rookie year. First-round draft pick wide receiver out of TCU. And now all of a sudden this year, he's a player. The player they think he's going to be and get even better and better. But he was being interviewed and was asked about Harbaugh. And he said, this guy walked in the door. He said, and he told everybody exactly what he expected. He said he goes in and jumps in with his khakis and his shirt on after practice in the cold tub, just like the players do. So he goes in and does the workouts just like the players do. Now, that doesn't make him a great coach, but he's got something special. And if you watch that locker room celebration going on last week, man, there's a total different mindset. I just wonder, Casey, if I'm not going to compare the two guys because, look, Zach Taylor's been to a couple of AFC championship games. Harbaugh's been to a Super Bowl as a head coach when he was back with the Niners, when he went up against his brother and got beat. But I'd like to think that there's a little more emotion and a little more urgency coming from the Bengals side because, to be quite honest, I've just not seen it much this year or for the past 2 or 3 years, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I do think that, for one, your point about head coaches, they matter. They do matter. I think that messaging for the team and their identity, are they going to be a hard-nosed, ground and pound and be this gritty football team, kind of the John Harbaugh mold, the guy that's going to hype you up, the all-in, I'm a football guy, practices kind of with the players, does exercises with them, things like that. That is invigorating. That is someone that knows how to lead a football team. And then there's kind of the other side, which we don't see a whole lot from Zach Taylor. We don't see a whole lot of emotion from him. And we get a lot of just plain coach speak answers and don't get a lot of what I would say publicity moments, presser type moments that are memorable.
Yeah.
And I do think that over time, some of that messaging that maybe started in 2019 gets a little old. I remember Joe Burrow, that Super Bowl season, and now this is a little bit of a different example because this came more from the players than it did coaching, but the messaging was, why not us? Right? They said that mantra throughout the entire playoffs, and then it turned into, it is us. It is us. And it completely changed their thinking, and they went from this team that was in the bottom of the cellar of the AFC and the NFL, really, and turned into this Super Bowl Cinderella story. They turned into a pretty good NFL football team going to the AFC Championship back-to-back seasons. And now we've kind of gotten to this place where maybe that messaging, the leadership, is getting a little old. It's getting a little stale because things are just not working. Things like that do matter. I don't know if it's all on Zach Taylor. It could be that players need to do a better job of having better messaging. Maybe the leadership has left. Jesse Bates, a big deal. DJ Reader, a big deal. Joe Mixon, a big deal. Tyler Boyd, a big deal. Those guys were leaders, vocal leaders in that locker room throughout that stretch and time period. So, I mean, I think that like what you're saying is, the leadership and the messaging is important to these teams. And I think both of them, like we've already said and stated, that this game is so important for both sides, because I think there's more riding on the Bengals. If they don't win this game, I think you really start having to point the finger at the leadership and saying, like, you can't get these teams, you can't get the Bengals over the hump. You can't get them ready for important games this season. They've lost a lot of one-possession games this year already. I think it's 5. They're 0-5 in one-possession games, something to that extent.
Yep.
So I do think it matters. I think it matters a lot. Head coaching and the messaging matters significantly, especially for this Bengals team.
The Chargers are like the Bengals. They've never won a Super Bowl. And ask yourself the question. If you were going to have somebody lead your franchise to win its first ever Super Bowl, who would you rather have? Harbaugh's going to win a Super Bowl in LA. There was something going on there at Michigan. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Will we ever know the entire story? We might. The NCAA is still looking into this whole thing. But Harbaugh has proven at the professional level with the 49ers. He's proven at the college level where he won a national championship. And now here he goes in year one of a franchise that was a total, and I mean unmitigated mess. And they're 6-3. Now, they may not make the playoffs. Nobody was expecting them to make the playoffs. Nobody. So we'll see how it plays out. But, I'm sure the odds would be pretty good. I'd bet that Harbaugh will win a Super Bowl with the Chargers before his tenure is said and done. All right. We got a big week in college football. They're all big weeks now. And the second round of the college football playoff rankings came out. And Luke, your Indiana Hoosiers are all the way up to number 5. I bring that up because, here we go now talking about some of the teams that might get in and might not get in. And I brought up on the show last week, trying to figure out, nothing's changed because we were on Monday, trying to figure out who's going to make it to the SEC championship game with all the tiebreakers and so forth is almost impossible to do. I mean, you'd have to be somebody that would sit there for a day or two to try and figure out who's going to get there. What we do know is Tennessee plays at Georgia. The loser of that game will not play in the SEC championship. The winner's not guaranteed to play in the SEC championship game. You have 2 lost teams in Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. Tennessee has 1 loss. This will be their second loss if they lose to Georgia. And you have Texas, who is a 1-loss team but hasn't beaten anybody. The only good team they've played all year long is Georgia, and they got boat raced. Luke, somebody, we thought when we got to 4 it was going to be tough. Somebody or somebodies were going to get left out. There are going to be a lot of somebodies that get left out this year because those 4 teams in the Big Ten, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana, all 4 of those teams are going to the playoff, right?
On the money, nail on the head. People have to start accepting that, and that brings up the broader point of the way to succeed in the 12-man playoff as a Power 2 conference, and in Power 2, I mean the SEC and the Big Ten, is try to set up a schedule where you play, say, 2 to 3 mid-tier games. So in comparison for the Big Ten, I'm going to say that for Ohio State is Indiana is a mid-tier game, which is turned into game of the year, but for Indiana, it's like the Michigan game. Michigan wasn't supposed to be this bad, but they were. But it was still a gritty win against the defending national champions. Or when they beat Washington at home. Washington's not very good, but they're not bad. And if you go in with 1 loss, like Penn State is going to have, like Indiana will probably have, like Ohio State already has, you're still going to make the playoff with 1 loss in a Power 2 conference. Now you're going to start looking at the SEC. So 1 loss in a Power 2, that's very narrow now. It looks like Texas is going to be a 1-loss team in at least for the regular season. We'll see what happens in the SEC championship game. But the SEC, all these teams have all kinds of tests left. The biggest discrepancy in the postseason, though, with these rankings coming out, was Georgia being ranked as low as they were. As low as, I mean, back out of it. Because they have the best wins in the country. They have the best schedule in the country. But they've had some tough losses against good teams. I think that they're going to curb stomp Tennessee this weekend, and that's what's going to we're going to talk about that as we get into it. And they still have to play Georgia Tech, who they're coming off an upset against Miami. I think the best thing to do is if you look at the ESPN playoff predictor calculator, it'll give you all the numbers from whatever happens. And I'm here to make the argument that the SEC is better than the Big Ten this year. I really don't think that Penn State has proven anything. I really don't think that Indiana has proven anything. They've proven that they aren't the old Indiana, the 3-9 Indiana. They've proven that they're a top 10 team in the country. But for 4 Big Ten teams to get ranked in this top 5, you had to do it because they're all either undefeated or one loss with a really good loss like Ohio State, a 1-point loss on the road at Oregon. But you mean to tell me Georgia wouldn't beat Penn State? Alabama's not going to
you know
beat
what?
Penn State?
I don't agree with that at all. I've watched Georgia
I
enough
don't
this year
know.
where they had Georgia basically has had one great half of football this year. The first half or the second half against Alabama. They almost lost to Kentucky. They've lost 2 games this year. Some of the other games they're barely getting by. And then you get to Texas. And you say, okay, well, let's see who Texas has beat. All right, it was a big deal early in the year when they beat Michigan at Michigan. But that's not such a big deal anymore. They've beaten Colorado State, UT San Antonio, Louisiana Monroe,
They
Mississippi
dominated
State.
Clemson.
Hang on, Mississippi. No, I'm talking about Texas now. Mississippi
excuse me.
State, Oklahoma, who stinks, totally stinks. They got killed by Georgia at home. I mean, killed by Georgia at home. They barely squeaked by Vandy. Vandy's a good team, but Vandy's not going to the playoff. They're not in the hunt for an SEC championship, and Texas has beaten Florida. The only ranked team when they played them, Vanderbilt might be ranked now, but the only ranked team that Texas has played this year, this whole season in the SEC, is Georgia, and they got annihilated. Now, they've got 3 games left on their schedule. At Arkansas, they play Kentucky at home, and then they have Texas A&M on the road. A&M was on a good little run, then all of a sudden they get blown out of the gym by South Carolina. So, of all the teams, I mean, I say that you just mentioned about Indiana and Penn State. Who have they beaten, right? Okay, you want to ask that question? That's a fair question. But who is Texas beaten? And Texas, last time I checked, they're in the top 4 or top 5 or 6 too, right?
Yeah, that's my point. Texas is very similar to these Big Ten teams. Everyone else in the SEC is in trouble. Texas laid out a schedule where you have to give them credit. Yes, they have taken care of business of the teams that they had. But they are in the same position as, per se, the Indiana Hoosiers. ESPN has Indiana at 96% because they are in the perfect position. That's the same with Ohio State, but they're predicting Ohio State to beat Indiana. So if you could put yourself in a position where you have one loss, but you're in the SEC or the Big Ten, even if you don't play the championship game, might be better for some of these. They don't.
All right, we're losing.
Let's
We're
go with
losing,
you guys.
Luke. You're going in and out. You want to try it one more time? Go ahead. Keep talking.
Let me know if
No,
I'm back.
he's out.
Are we good?
No.
Oh, no.
No. Okay. But look, it's going to be fascinating to see because there's not another monster game besides this weekend in the SEC. Although that Texas Tech and A&M, it's a monster game because one will come in with 2 losses, the other will come in with 1 loss. It's a big rivalry. It's in Texas. Will have a huge impact on the college football playoff. So that's the last game of the year, right after Thanksgiving. But shy of that, this is Tennessee, Georgia. We are really getting down to make or break time. Ole Miss looked dead and buried. Now they've come on strong. Just when you think Georgia gets it going, they get killed and look terrible in getting killed. Carson Beck has just had a brutal season. Georgia's got to be ready to move on there for sure. Georgia, and look, I'm not taking anything away from the kid. He's had some big games and some big wins for them. I just mentioned, the second half he played against Alabama, going to Texas and killing them. In fairness to Texas in that game, Quinn Ewers was not completely healthy. He's missed time this year. They played him a little bit. They took him out. They had Manning in. They took him out. So, but Texas is a team of all the teams out there. That's the one I look at. And look, they might win a national championship. But that's a team I look at and I say to myself, how in the world are they ranked where they're ranked? And the other one would be Penn State. How in the world is Penn State ranked where they're ranked? I mean, they haven't beaten anybody. And the only game they played was at home against a legitimate top 5 team, and they got beat. Were it not for a pick 6, they'd have been completely overwhelmed and dominated in that game by Ohio State. The only reason it was that close was because the first pass of the game by Will Howard was a pick 6 the other way. Yeah. After that moment, they were down 10-0 in that game. Well, Ohio State. So, who have they beaten? Either one of those teams.
Well, for Penn State, though, their one loss is coming from a one-possession loss against Ohio State team that was ranked 4 at the time.
But I'm asking, who have they beat?
Oh, they haven't really beaten anyone. And I am on board with that philosophy, but yeah, and Jacob's motioning over here that Texas hasn't beaten anyone either, and we both agree with that. I think both teams really haven't beaten anybody. But out of all the teams, I do think the Nittany Lions have proven that they can hang in there with the top 10 or the top 4 teams. I mean, it was one possession game against Ohio State, and they got the pick 6. You mentioned it. They got it. It happened in the game. So they deserve to be somewhere in the mix. I do think that maybe 4 might be a little high, but at the same time, I don't think it's too egregious. The only one that I think is egregious to me is Texas. I kind of agree with you on that. They lost. Their big loss to Georgia came from 2 possessions, and they looked horrible. Now, they were hurt. Like you said, they were rotating in guys, just trying to make something happen, make it work.
Yeah.
That Texas A&M game, I know that they stubbed their toe, but I do think that there's a chance that is a big game that we can really get a better gauge of what this Texas team really is. I look at that Notre Dame game early on in the season, and I think Texas A&M is a legit threat. I think they're a top 20 team in college football right now.
Oh,
I think that's a good barometer to see where they're truly at. Other than that, they won't have any other tests, any other challenges until the SEC championship, which we'll find out more then.
Well, if they get there. I mean, they've got to win the Texas A&M game. If they win their game, if they win out, they're in the SEC championship game. That's the only easy thing to figure out about who's going to play in that SEC title game, is that if Texas wins out, the Longhorns will play in the SEC championship game. Who they play remains to be seen. All right, Luke, let's get to the picks. Let's get going.
All right, am I fully back here?
Yep.
Yeah, you're back.
Sounds like you're good.
Okay. I think that is just something so cool about this 12-team playoff, though. We didn't even bring up the idea of these dark horse teams. Like you mentioned, Colorado can make the playoff. Like they control their own destiny, and I love that about the 12-team playoff just because in years prior, it felt like teams did everything that they could possibly do perfectly right, accurate, and then the committee's calling them or telling them, you fell short. We have nothing to tell you. The 12-team playoff is great for everyone. You know what also is great for everyone? Another 5-2 week for this guy right here. We are now tied at the top, 38-31 for TB and LB. Casey's still making his way back up, but guys, I got to give it to us.
Big lead.
Collectively, I think we could go pick for pick with a lot of, fraud pick'em shows out there on the internet nowadays. But 7 games over 500, that's pretty good. Let's start with Wrigley Field. This is a cool matchup. I figured we'd pick it. 28.5 is the number. Ohio State versus Northwestern. Game is technically a home game in Chicago, but you already know there will be a lot of scarlet and gray there. I'll make this one quick. I'm going to take Northwestern. I feel like they do play Ohio State pretty tough, especially defensively. 28 and a hook. That's 4 touchdowns and extra points. I think Ohio State might win this game by 28. So that would catch my bet. I'll take the guys in purple.
All right, Casey.
Yeah, I think it would only be smart of me to ride the hot hand. Clearly, Luke is on a heater. I'm going to ride with Northwestern here. 28 and a half, that hook, I feel like that's going to matter. I feel like that's going to really matter. So I'm going to ride with the guys in purple.
Guys, this is going to be so ugly, it's ridiculous. Ohio State is now ramping up. All systems go. They had a couple of little games there where Nebraska wasn't quite right. They know what's coming next week. They are going to run it up big time on Northwestern. By the way, speaking of running it up, the Ohio University Bobcats, winners of 3 in a row, tied atop the MAC in MACtion last night. Roll again. OU 7-3. All right, go on. What's next?
All right. Could be game of the week, but there's some really good ones. I think this is certainly the game of the week in college football with a little bit of a weak slate. Tennessee versus Georgia. And this is all you have to know. This is the playoff argument for me. I go to the odds. I go to the numbers. This is a Tennessee team who the quarterback, I mean, I know he's a freshman, but he's going to go. They're saying that they think he is going to go and he is good to play. And the line is still 10.5 points. Georgia is that much better than Tennessee. Georgia is that good. Give me the dogs. They absolutely roll Tennessee at home.
Casey?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much with you. I think Georgia is really good.
Are you just going to pick every game he picks now?
No,
2
I
games,
don't think so.
Relax.
It's just 2, but I do think that I don't know. I thought I saw reports that the kid was not playing. At least that's what Jacob is shaking his head over here at me, saying that that's correct. But anyways, 10 points. That's pretty easy for Georgia to do. I don't trust Tennessee. I think that Georgia's defense is just going to show why that team deserves to be in the playoffs. And they're going to handle business. They're going to handle business against Tennessee. If there was any hope for Tennessee, it's going to be Tennessee's defense against Carson Beck. And you just hope that Carson Beck makes a lot of mistakes. But I just don't see that happening.
Okay, I can't remember who I picked. But I want to pick Georgia. Did I pick Georgia?
You did.
Okay, all right, I picked Georgia. Yeah, look, whether this kid plays or not, this is Georgia. Kirby Smart's team is on. The season is on the line, and they're at home. They'll cover 10.5. What's next?
I apologize if I was wrong on that injury. I know that their head coach said he was in great shape to play against.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Week.
Yep.
So
yep,
I mean, if the coach is saying he's in great shape, I would figure he is. But there is some uncertainty there, and they need him. So I think even if he's a freshman, he's got to go if he gets out of concussion protocol. This is probably the trap game of the week, at least where people are circulating speculation, a massive game for playoff implications. It was always a team like Kansas to play spoiler inside of the conference on BYU's potential playoff year. I'm going to take the +3. Kansas is coming off their game of the season last week where they beat up on Iowa State. That's not a great Iowa State team, but it's a good one. If you can beat up on them the way they did, BYU should have lost last week at Utah. This time they don't escape. Give me Kansas +3, but I think they win this game and play spoiler on the entire BYU season.
Wow. This is where we're going to have a difference of opinion. I know that they've looked vulnerable. I think everyone thinks that they've looked vulnerable, and that's why I got to go the opposite way. I think Kansas has not looked great this season. They've been very disappointing. BYU is going to handle business this week. I don't think that their spoiler happens just yet. I do think that Colorado versus BYU is the matchup where they're going to get spoiled, and Colorado ends up winning the championship. So I'm going to have to wait a couple weeks before that happens. Give me BYU -3.
I don't know why so many people are not giving BYU credit. This team has won against a lot of good competition this year. Remember now, SMU's only loss of the season, and right now they're in the driver's seat to win the ACC. That's a good football team, SMU. SMU's only loss was against BYU. BYU is going to blow Kansas out of the gym. BYU covers 3 easily. Move on.
And there is your Tom Brenneman Square Sucker Pick of the Week, presented by UDF and Encore Technologies.
Give it a rest,
Let's
big
move
boy,
on.
big boy.
Let's move on to the NFL. Game of the week, or actually not even the game of the week inside the AFC, but would normally be the game of the week. Ravens and the Steelers. I love this spread. Ravens are 3-point road favorites. I think this is typically inside of the AFC North, where you say these are two really good football teams. Their records speak for themselves. So I'm going to take the home underdog, but that's not the case. I really do think the Ravens are that good. I'm still keeping them in Super Bowl contention. So I have them -3. They got to show up offensively and really hang in there in the trenches because the Steelers got a heck of a win last week on the road.
So, Luke, fun stat: Lamar is 1-4 versus the Steelers in his career. I think that continues. Give me the +3 easily, even if this is a close game. Steelers +3. I love it. I love it by a field goal. Give me the Steelers.
I'm with you all the way, Casey. I think Pittsburgh shows up and they get after the quarterback. Pittsburgh, men of aluminum.
All right, this is a good game. It would have been an even better game if the Broncos made a chip shot field goal last week on the road, but the Falcons go to Denver in Mile High. They're 2.5-point underdogs. So if the Broncos win by a field goal or more, they cover. I'm going to take Denver here. I do like Kirk Cousins, but I really don't like Kirk Cousins on the road ever unless it's a primetime game. This is not. I think it's tough to win in Denver. People don't talk about that enough because they've been so bad. This is not a bad Denver team. This is actually a good team, not a great team. They win at home and cover.
Ooh. This was a tough one for me to decide. I had a tough time because I loved the Falcons early this season. They're 6-4, I believe. They've kind of disappointed, but not really. I think they're right where I thought they would be at. Denver, on the other hand, that defense is incredible. And like Luke said, they're really tough to play in Denver. It's 4:05. Is that considered prime enough for you? I'll go with the Falcons. That 2.5 is going to be my saving grace, I think. I think that's going to end up being a really close game. Both teams have really solid defenses that don't give up a lot of points. And I think the hook will save me there.
Okay, I'm with Luke on this one. I'm going with the Broncos. I think both teams have a lot to play for, clearly. And look, we just don't ever know what's going to happen with Cousins. Somebody's walking up to my front door here, and there's about to be my dog is about to go ballistic here. So, Luke, move on to the next pick.
All right, try and get yourself muted there. We can throw in your pick here, but Casey, we can get a little banter going about this one because this is the game of the year so far. The Chiefs are going to go to Buffalo. The Bills are 2.5-point favorites. Starting to see a real consistency within these matchups. Whether it's the Chiefs, Bengals, or Bills, whenever they play each other in the regular season, it's always a 2.5 to 3-point spread. You're going to say, yes, that's typical of two really good teams squaring off. However, the Chiefs are undefeated. The Bills have 2 losses, but I think that the Bills are in serious stride right now, Casey, and I think the line makes sense. I've seen people say that it's a trap line and they want you to take the Chiefs. I think that playing at home in a game like this, especially with an atmosphere like Buffalo, is a massive deal. So I'm going to take the Bills, but I'd be interested on your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, this is a tough one too. The NFL slate is just a lot of the good games are tough games to pick. I have a hard time betting against the Chiefs. I just do, but they're so bad and keep winning. It just makes me want to pick the Bills. You said this was in Buffalo?
It is.
I've been to Buffalo. I went to the playoff game, Cincinnati versus Buffalo a couple years ago. That atmosphere, I don't know. It's not top notch. So I'm going to have to go with the Chiefs. I don't think that fan base is going to be ravaging enough. They're not going to be crazy enough to get that team where it needs to be. I'm going to just ride the craziness that is the Chiefs, and they're going to probably win again. They're probably going to find a way to sneak away with another win, probably a field goal as time expires like they always do, and cover. So give me the Chiefs. Why not? Can't bet against them.
All right. Okay. You know what? I have always said I'll never bet against Patrick Mahomes, but I've changed my mind. I'm betting against him this week. I originally had Kansas City. Casey, if you can change that to Buffalo. I thought more about this after I made that pick yesterday. I just think that there's so many things going against Kansas City at this point. You can't continue to win playing the way they're playing on offense, period. And they're just not doing anything on offense. And they've won so many games at the very end already this year where they probably could have or should have lost. They're going to lose in Buffalo this week. First loss of the year for the Chiefs.
I couldn't agree more. I think they've just been reeling so much to this point where you can't say that they're bad. You can't say that they're lucky. You can say that they've been gracious of a couple good breaks here and there. They're still a dominant football team and a dynasty in the peak of their prime. But I don't think you can play the caliber of football they've played the last couple weeks and then have to go to Buffalo against one of the best teams, if not the second best team in all of the NFL right now, and expect to win. That's just a tough place to play, and the AFC is going to get even closer. And now Sunday Night Football. I love when the Bengals are on prime time. We don't even have to talk about this game anymore. We've already, feel like, covered every single aspect of it, and everything could be pointing to the Chargers, and I'm still going to take the team that reads on my heart right now. So give me the B. I think collectively, the three of us, if we never picked Bengals games or at least took them out of our records, win or loss, we'd be a couple games better. But hey, hopefully they get us back here on Sunday night. I'll be looking forward to it. And everyone, if you're watching, I know Jacob will be on his live stream with Chatterbox Bengals. So sometimes I need a fan to watch with here or there. It can be hard.
I mean, come on, you already know my orange-colored glasses never come off, so they're going to get it done. They have to. They're going to win this ball game and cover easily. Tom?
Okay, I don't know about easily. Boy, I mean, I wrestled with this one big time. I wrestled with it big time. You're on the road. You're against a better coach. I think the Bengals have certainly more firepower. That's not even remotely debatable on offense. Defense, I get very worried about the Bengals' inability, A, to stop the run, and then B, to get better on third down. They've just been a brutal defense. They can't get off the field on third down. And if San Diego is in a position the whole game, or LA, forgive me, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, could get ugly. But I'm gonna be glass half full guy. I'm going with the Bengalis. I'm going with them. This is my last time to pick them for this year. I am going with the Cincinnati Bengals, or at least my last time going with them this year, this week.
All right, you know what time it is, guys. What are we doing this weekend? Casey, kick us off. What could be the move?
What could be the move? I got a couple different things this weekend. I've got well, first off, I was invited to watch the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight at someone's house. That would be an interesting little thing to do on Friday night. Saturday, my niece, she's turning 10. I think we're going to have a big birthday party for her. 10's a big one. 10's a really big one. No longer a single digit. And then Sunday, I'm going to be probably just spending all day watching football. And enjoying Sunday Night Football because I think we got flexed out of our last primetime slot game. So I'll be enjoying that.
Luke, what's a move?
I remember last week I had 3 broadcasts, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The Indiana bye week is also my bye week. So I'm just hanging out. I think I do a lot of that throughout the week just as a college student regardless, but really nice to not have to prep anything. I think this week off for the team is going to be huge before I will go to Columbus with them. So really looking forward to that. Trying to lock in on my studies here this weekend, and then it's just about Thanksgiving break. But before that, the biggest game of the college football season for Ohio State and Indiana. So I'm just hanging out this weekend. I'll be watching a ton of football.
I love my main man, the real spirit cat. He hears Casey talking about visiting a niece, and the real spirit cat says, "Uncle Casey, could you please tell me that story about that one time you killed a cow?"
I didn't kill the cow.
All right. We've been through this, but I think it's great. Spirit Cat, that proves how long you've been with us. Thank you so much. Look, the move for me is, in case people didn't know, Stanford and Cal are now in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Go figure that, right? Stanford and Cal. Well, I am going to Cal Berkeley this weekend for Syracuse versus Cal. Cal has lost 3 games this year, including to Miami, by a total of 5 points. This is a team that could be in that mix for the ACC Conference Championship game if they could finish. But the move for me is, after our election a week and a half ago, I am going to be a man of Christian spirit and good heart to go out to Berkeley, California, the very bastion of liberalism. And if there's anybody that just needs a shoulder to cry on, I'm here for him. So that's the move this weekend. Anybody have a problem with that?
What a saint.
No, I think you said that they were playing Stanford, though. They do play Syracuse.
Yeah, it's Syracuse. I'm sorry. Okay, Syracuse against Cal. All right. Anyway, fellas, Luke, enjoy your weekend off. I thought maybe you were going to come back home and see your mom. You'd have missed me, but I'll drive over maybe one day next week and see you. So enjoy your weekend, my man.
All right. You have a good one, too. Safe travels out there. Casey didn't kill the cow. Final words.
Okay, Casey, have a great weekend, my man, and enjoy your niece's birthday party.
Of course. Thank you, Tom. And I'm so thankful that there's someone out there with as big as a heart as you, Tom.
Thank you.
To be able to let those liberal elitists have a shoulder to cry on. I just think that you're a big man. You're the bigger guy.
That is so kind of you, Casey, to point out. I would never want to pat myself on the back for being that kind of a guy. But if anybody just needs a hug, a safe space, I'm here for them. So we thank all of you for joining us here today on Dialed In with Tom Brenneman. And we are very much looking forward to seeing you again on Monday. Monday is going to be a big show. Remember, we come your way at 9 o'clock in the morning. We're the first guys in town to talk about the Bengals game. No local radio, right? Nothing else before us on Chatterbox, although you can check out Jacob during the game and after the game. But as far as when you get up on Monday, you want to get the lowdown, the real lowdown on what happened, Luke, Casey, and I will be here for you. Hopefully, we're not here to be a shoulder to cry on Monday morning. So to each and every one of you, we thank Casey for his hard work. We thank Luke so much for his great work as well. To each and every one of you, God bless. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you Monday.